The ultimate fate of the radical is likely to be an unpleasant one, whether corruption and damnation at the hands of the forces with which he has dealings, or excommunication and execution at the hands of the Inquisition he purportedly serves. There is no strict hierarchy or formal organization within the Inquisition, which is very much a council of individuals, an organization of peers. There is no internal affairs department to which an Inquisitor can report another as being out of line or heretical, nor a division that deals with processing suspected cases. Instead, there is a fairly loose process by which suspected heretics, traitors, and radicals within the Inquisition are dealt with by a conclave. This process begins with denunciation, followed by a trial by peers, then either acquittal, execution, or excommunication. The first step in the downfall of an Inquisitor is the denunciation to the Inquisition. Many of them skirt the boundaries of what is and what is not acceptable behavior, but few will be called to answer these potential breaches. Almost every Inquisitor is equally powerful, their authority on any given case answerable only to the Emperor himself. An Inquisitor who has struck with heretics, or worse, might be whispered about wherever they meet, rumors of their dastardly sins and fell behavior spreading amongst acolytes and Inquisitors alike, but nothing will be formally done about it. Informally, high-ranking Inquisitors, or particularly vehement peers, might dispatch investigation teams of their own to root out the truth of the matter, unless one of the accused Inquisitor's peers is prepared to denounce him. To denounce an Inquisitor is a bold and dangerous move. It is to not only cast aspersions on the behavior of an Inquisitor, but to declare him a traitor, a heretic, or worse. Such a move is not undergone lightly, for it can easily backfire, resulting in a souring of relations between Inquisitors of a conclave, or worse, the excommunication or execution of the accuser himself. The accuser must be sure of his own suspicions, sure enough to be able to convince a jury of peers that he is right. Once the accuser has made his denunciation, the accused is called to be judged, and a jury of his peers is assembled, comprised of as many of his fellow Inquisitors as wish to answer the summons. Next, the accuser lays bare his evidence and makes his case. The accused gets the opportunity to defend themselves, calling whatever witnesses or presenting whatever evidence they feel appropriate, although in many cases they are not given much time to prepare. Finally, the jury passes judgment, declaring the accused innocent or guilty as they see fit. An Inquisitor declared guilty by a trial of their peers will typically then be declared excommunicate traitoris, and then immediately executed for heresy then and there. However, many Inquisitors genuinely accused of such heinous crimes, heinous in the eyes of the Puritans that is, are sensible enough to remain at large, rather than turning themselves in to be judged. After all, in their eyes, they are above the law and have done no wrong. In such a case, they will still be judged in absentia, and judgment passed to declare their guilt or innocence. Those Inquisitors found guilty in absentia will be declared excommunicati traitoris, and a warrant will be issued for their arrest and execution across the sector or beyond. Being excommunicated means they will have their inquisitorial powers stripped from them. They will be branded a heretic and a traitor, and they will be cast from the light of the God Emperor. This may seem all very straightforward, but in application it is far from it. The galaxy is a very big place, and the Inquisition is but one organization spread across a large area. Transmitting the excommunicated status of an Inquisitor amongst all the Inquisition's holdings within a sector can take standard years, and it can take far longer to spread word of the verdict to every individual inquisitorial agent. It is not unheard of for word to spread to an agent of the Inquisition years after the judgment is passed, who in turn takes the law into his own hands and hunts down and executes the Inquisitor, oblivious to the fact that the Inquisitor in question has successfully appealed for innocence in the matter. Similarly, the authority of an Inquisitor relies upon the twin weapons of fear and respect. An Inquisitor's rosette is a totem that commands great respect, a symbol of a higher authority with no more real power than any other physical artifact. Being excommunicated does not strip an Inquisitor of any real status, for they are still able to command the fear and respect of others simply by virtue of who they are. In the eyes of Imperial law, they might be a criminal and a traitor, but far removed from the centers of authority on most worlds of the Imperium, without a powerful inquisitorial presence, they remain an Inquisitor in every respect. Obviously, the acolytes of an Inquisitor who is excommunicated are similarly excommunicated, except they do not have the power or force of their own to rely on when things get sticky. The Inquisition will move quickly to seize holdings and finances, as well as to arrest or disband the network of contacts of an excommunicated Inquisitor, potentially curtailing the activities of him and his servants. However, any radical Inquisitor worth their name will have put measures in place to prepare for such an eventuality, creating shadowy accounts and assets that remain hidden from the Inquisition. Some of them put contingency operations in place, designed to activate in the event of their excommunication or execution to either safeguard their plans or ensure that their enemies reap a whirlwind of disaster. The excommunication of a particularly powerful or influential Inquisitor can result in a ripple of dissent or defiance within a conclave, either as an Inquisitor's shadow assets are enabled and begin to wreak havoc against their enemies, or as their allies within the Inquisition stand firmly by their side. The eruption of factional infighting within the Inquisition can be devastating, especially as it has the potential to escalate further still. This can all lead to the most devastating outcome for factionalism within a sector, which is a full-blown Inquisition war. Such a war erupts when opposing factions and rivals within a particular sector conclave declare one another excommunicatus, or refuse to submit to the authority of their peers. Such disagreements are normally diffused by careful diplomacy, a discreet assassination, or a swift execution. But on rare occasions, when the conclave either fails to act swiftly enough to quell such dissent, or the disagreement strikes a fault line within the Inquisition, it can escalate very quickly. When it does so, it drags Inquisitors into the conflict from the whole conclave, forcing them to choose sides. Inquisitorial conclave is never a voice of unity or quorum at the best of times, and such arguments can fracture an already tenuous consensus along factional lines, breaking the Inquisition in the sector into a whole mess of smaller organizations, each with their own agendas. Most such fractures hold there, the Inquisitorial conclave engaging in a tit-for-tat diplomatic squabble between a dozen or more small factions for an indefinable amount of time. During this period, a sector often slides further towards the yawning abyss of chaos, for whilst the Inquisition fights amongst itself, the individual Inquisitors do not fight the enemies of the Imperium. Such civil wars can last solar decades, but rarely escalate beyond minor infighting or skirmishes on fringe worlds. Sometimes, however, a conflict can escalate even further, especially when the factions are divided along fundamental ideological fault lines, or where two or more factions wield a great deal of power and support, and therefore have all the more to lose by backing down or conceding. Such an escalation leads to one inexorable conclusion: a full-blown Inquisition war. Inquisition wars are, thankfully, very rare, only a handful having occurred in the past 10,000 standard years. They are terrifying events, far more devastating than any alien invasion or heretical uprising, for they see Inquisitor turn on Inquisitor, each bringing their full might and authority to bear. Shadow missions assassinate planetary governors. Entire regiments of the Astra Militarum are commandeered and turned on one another. Whole star systems burn via exterminatus as the doomsday weapons of the Inquisitors are unleashed against the strongholds of one another. An Inquisition war rarely rumbles on for longer than a solar decade, a Tehran century at most, for they are so devastating that the wider Imperium is forced to act swiftly. Entire chapters of Space Marines are deployed to the sector with orders to terminate any and all Inquisitors with extreme prejudice. If one or another faction does not hold the upper hand when fighting ceases, the Imperium is not averse to wiping the slate clean in the most bloody way possible and establishing a fresh, inquisitorial conclave with Inquisitors drawn from other parts of the galaxy. And yet, the end of an Inquisition war does not herald the end for the turbulent times in the sector, for the devastation and dissent caused by the fighting can have longer-lasting repercussions and consequences that reverberate for millennia.